All right, friends, we're back again with another video on. We're gonna do a reaction video to Jason Blaha. That's right. So we're gonna react to his this gym lifting, recruiting, fitness, gear slaves video. Jason Blaha. Blaha says we don't store carbohydrates as fat, but we. But what does that mean? We do store carbohydrates as fat. We do. We do. He's lying. He's making that up. You do store it if it's in excess.
Carbohydrates don't store as fat, but what does that even mean? Hey, everybody, it's Jason Block.
It does store as fat in excess. It's known fact. Excessive carbohydrates will store, well, they'll store as glycogen in your muscle and liver, but eventually they'll spill out, they'll store as fat.
I here thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today.
In other words, when it reaches a maximum, in a natural person walking around, natural people that don't lift weights, okay? They're not trying to pump glycogen into the muscle to try to expand the sarcoplasm. That's totally different. But eventually you'll get fat from them, over consuming them. In bodybuilding, well, not so much. I mean, in sarcoplasmic training, like Blaha does, lifting sarcoplasmic for sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, creating these fake muscles through the sarcoplasm. Yeah, it's gonna load in there a lot. Will he get fat from it? I don't know. If it goes above, even beyond that, probably most likely yes.
Quick reminder, though, if you will click like down below, I would appreciate it. If you aren't following or subscribed, please do so.
And the rest of the population out there, because 99% of people lifting in the gym, after they've adapted to the full range of motion, eccentric in the full range of motion, they're not getting damaged, they're not building any muscle, they're building sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and an inflammatory response, inflaming their muscles all day. Now, if you're not eating enough carbohydrates, then it's just inflammatory response you're relying on. Now, if you're trying to expand the sarcoplasm, they're chasing the pump. That pump is because of the carbohydrate. Expanding the sarcoplasm, okay?
Guys would drop me a comment down under the video. I would appreciate that a lot. Thank you. It can be just to say hello. It can be your thoughts on the video. Okay, so when I make this statement, this is based upon ridiculous, enormous amounts of evidence in the lab, the metabolic ward and everything in humans.
Sure.
It's not about my opinion. I have definitely successfully used low-carb phases in the past. In fact, I lost 50 pounds once doing ketogenic diet when I was younger at a certain point. So I want to be clear when I make these statements. We're talking about evidence. We're talking about the body. This is not even about my personal preference or opinions, okay?
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, let's set that aside and be objective. But
at Anytime Fitness, your time.
So again, let's set that aside and be objective. But realistically speaking, when you look at the totality of the evidence, humans do not store carbohydrate as subcutaneous fat. This has been researched. When overfeeding occurs, we can store a small amount of it as visceral fat. But here's the thing, it was tested because the speculation was because of the way the liver processes fructose, everything else, and even table sugars might store as more visceral fat than other ones in overfeeding. Turns out they don't, other than...
Okay, let's find out if they do or not, because I'm not sure of everything. I popped this up in AI already ahead of time. Let me see. Carbohydrates don't inherently make you fat, but excessive calorie intake, whether from carbs or other macronutrients, can lead to weight gain. The body uses carbohydrates for energy. Okay, when carbohydrates intake exceeds energy needs, the surplus is stored as what? Glycogen. That's how you build these sarcoplasmic muscles. Look, when you're building myofibrillar growth, protein synthesis needs to exceed that breakdown to see that mass on that myofibrillar, on that muscle, whatever, myofibrillar growth. Now, how do you see sarcoplasmic hypertrophy? When glycogen when carbohydrate intake exceeds energy needs. You understand me? When that exceeds energy needs, that's when you see the sarcoplasm expand. So you get this thing called sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Okay, dude? So there you go. The surplus is stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles, says the University of Guelph. One glycogen storage is at its capacity. And this is probably a person that's not lifting because you haven't reached your capacity. The excess glucose is converted to fat and stored later use as whatever is fat. And this can happen in lifting too if it exceeds a certain level, like it goes so high there's too much of it. Definitely is going to be some fat there, right? Now, when you see these bodybuilders on steroids, they eat a lot of slave food diet, carbohydrates, because you notice that they look really fat on the off season. They just look like a big balloon, really fat. They look disgusting. Why is that? Because the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy they're training is sarcoplasmic. That's really what it is. And that's why they look like that. So what do? To get rid of that look, to get it more cosmetic-y, they take anabolics now. They switch from these high androgens to anabolics, high anabolics. That's what they do. All right. Anyways, carbs as fuel, energy storage, glycogen capacity, fat conversion, insulin role. Well, we're going to make you insulin resistant. Calorie balance, and yada, yada, yada. So, okay, whatever. You get the idea. So can they make you fat? Yes.
And it will be more biased towards the liver. Okay, so fructose will raise liver fat, but it's not going to put 3 pounds of it on you. Okay, and that's the difference.
Fructose will give you fatty liver disease. So will alcohol. So will sugar.
But yeah, carbohydrates only in small quantities store as visceral fat around your organs. They never store under your skin, and obviously neither does protein. And this has been determined with carbon isotope testing at this point, to where researchers have taken the different foods and done this and then tested it to see and scan where it stores and goes in the body. And all of the fat under your skin seems to come from dietary fat that you ate. It does not occur through de novo lipogenesis. All right? It does not occur. It all comes from the fat you eat. So this gets confusing for people because they're kind of like, well, how come when I was eating all these other carbs, I gained weight, I gained fat? Well, you could have gained a lot of bloat. But you gained weight because you ate fat with it. So
if you're insulin resistant and you eat a lot of fat, you could get fat too. But like I said, when this exceeds this energy source, it goes way so high. Yes, it'll store as fat in fat cells.
So here's what it comes down to. Yes, calorie surplus itself will cause you to store dietary fat that you eat. And it doesn't matter where that surplus comes from. I'm going to say we could exclude protein because that's been studied, and actually you can't seem to create a surplus. And the 3 studies it tried, they failed to be able to create a surplus with protein or any weight gain. When hundreds of extra grams were added, that doesn't occur. So let's set that aside. That's a whole different crazy conundrum with thermic effect and nutrient partitioning. Other than to say
Sure, yeah, okay, whatever. Conundrum, nutrient partitioning, yes.
protein is pretty dang awesome if you don't want to get fat.
Yeah, protein is awesome if you don't want to get fat, but I've heard people getting fat from eating protein or eating animal products. Is that what you're talking about, protein? Are you talking about plants? Protein from plants, blah, or like animal protein? He didn't really elaborate. I don't know.
Maybe the reason some people on some of these high-calorie, more ketogenic type diets don't gain fat is because they're eating excessive amounts of protein. But that's a whole different story.
Excessive amounts of protein from what, though? What, animal or these so-called plants which are deficient?
That's a whole different story. So when it comes to that's what causes it, like the fat that you eat. And again, that's why, when fat goes really high, obviously you're going to gain more fat because you have more available of what you can store. When you overfeed carbohydrates to the point to where we create a large excess of energy, the amount of fat you gain becomes entirely dependent upon how much fat you eat. That becomes the only factor, because at a certain point you don't create an extra surplus. So like, let's say you're already at a 700 calorie surplus, and 500 calories of it's coming from
Big life changes, big storage.
surplus, and and 500 calories of it's coming from fat, when you start adding
Okay.
another 1,000 calories of carbohydrate, your surplus doesn't actually go up. And I know that sounds crazy to people, but that's because they don't understand how carbohydrate surplus works. It makes some strange changes in the body. So what they have found.
They don't know how it works. A lot of people don't know what they're getting. Even when they're lifting, they think pumps build muscles somehow. If I get pumped, that build a muscle. And then there's people that think, oh my God, I got these things called DOMs. I got damaged or something. I got this pain for days. Oh, this is a bad thing. They think pumps are good things. If I get pumped. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to go through a pain threshold to build myofibrillar growth. I guess people don't like, they're uncomfortable with that. So when they're uncomfortable, they run away from things that make them uncomfortable. So if you're uncomfortable, you can't build myofibrillar growth. But if you're comfortable pumping your muscles, well, you'll get what you're looking for. You'll get a nice pumped up body, like, a bubble body like Blaha. Pump up the sarcoplasm. And this is the look you get, like Blaha.
In carbohydrate overfeeding studies. So let's set aside the carbon isotope testing. Let's look at think about the different studies where they.
Carbohydrate overfeeding. Carbohydrates don't build bodies, okay? But they will give you this artificial look, like you're, a muscle, fake muscles, artificial, whatever. Artificial muscles, bro. Pumping the sarcoplasm, yeah.
Forced extra carbohydrate down. They've done it where they've taken women, because women, again, much smaller, lower maintenance, to where they've added 1,500 calories of extra carbohydrate to their.
Believe me, the muscles can hold a lot of this glycogen in there. That's what he's doing. You see that? He's pumping this energy source into his muscles. Look at him. Pump, 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 full range of motion. Pump, pump.
Diet just to see.
Let me see how much I can get in there. Here's the funny part. He's actually not eating enough complex carbohydrates to pump up his arms. His arms will probably get relatively to a nice relative size, so his shoulders and chest. If he would eat more complex carbohydrates, they'd pump up. See what I mean? But he eats slave food. He eats really bad slave food. That's why it's not enough. The tofu and all that doesn't work. That doesn't cause it to pump up. But okay, whatever, man.
Happens. They only stored like 1 gram of it as fat, by the way, in their organs. It was like such a tiny microscopic amount. So people are like, well, what happened? Their metabolic rate skyrocketed. So when you overfeed carbohydrates, your body goes into.
It's an energy source. The more energy foods you eat, these so-called, they're like drugs, actually. This type of energy is considered a drug. That's why you deteriorate really fast eating these so-called energy foods. So that's what they fed slaves. They fed slaves these energy foods, and then they worked them to death, and then they died. You work, you deteriorate, and then you die. That's it. Now, people can't figure out why they don't look 30 years old. They're passing their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even 90s, and they go, why do I look so old? You don't really look old. You look deteriorated. Now, can you reverse that? Well, you're going to have to eat a lot of meat like I did in the summertime. Bro, last year, I went all out last year in the summertime at the buffet. I was there almost every day, 5 days a week, eating like tons and tons of beef. Now, of course, I switched over too. I'm eating beef, but I'm eating a lot of seafood now, sushi, seafood, like raw fish and stuff. So I've added that to my menu because you need a lot of omega-3s, and that tend to help a lot even more. And so here's the thing. A lot of you are walking around with astronomically small testicles. You just don't realize it. You've never seen your full potential in your testicles. They're tiny. What you need to do is overload your body with omega-3. And I'm not talking about supplements. I'm talking about eating real seafood, getting your omega-3 from seafood and overloading your body with it. And you'll find your testicles they'll get bigger. They'll increase. The weight will increase. Now, one of these guys online, they're always talking about kefir. If you drink kefir, that also helps in the weight of the testicle. I mean, you could eat You could add that, the kefir. It's got this bacteria in it. It could help. Can't hinder you, but it could help a little bit. But definitely omega-3. It's a known fact. They've done scientific reports. They've done them on these rats and whatever. I know they don't have enough on humans, but man, it says the testicles had increased definitely. So I'm gonna have to believe him, bro, because it worked for me, and I definitely think it'll work for you. So high omega-3, eat a lot of seafood. That is definitely a plus, and eat a lot of animal fat.
Strict carbohydrate burning mode. So, and notice I said overfeed. So yes, if you're overfeeding anything, you're not losing body fat. Let's just be clear on that. That's kind of the whole idea. Overfeeding means calorie surplus. So we are forcing more than you're burning. All right, everyone understand that? So when I say this, it's not saying you're going to lose body fat. It's
Okay,
saying,
so if you force more than you're burning, what did it say in that report? It says that the glycogen stores are increasing, right? Look. So if when carbohydrate intake exceeds energy needs, the surplus is stored as glycogen in the liver and where? Muscles, bro. And muscles can hold a lot of glycogen. You understand me? And that increases what? The sarcoplasm, giving you artificial muscle growth. You understand, dude? So yeah, the excess glucose is converted, and then the excess glucose is converted to fat. One's glycogen store is at its capacity, but you as a lifter haven't reached your capacity. See what I mean? You haven't really reached your capacity. They're talking about most likely a person just walking around all day, a natural person walking around that doesn't lift weights. Anyway.
that you won't store any of the carbohydrate. So what ends up happening.
The only thing Blaha is doing here is getting an inflammatory response, lifting every day in the gym. He's pumping glycogen in his muscle. He's pumping glycogen in there. I don't know if it depends how much he's eating. I don't know what he's eating. And he's shortening his muscles at the same time. So the sarcomeres have shortened in series. They're not growing. He prevents them from growing, and they've shortened, and he's increasing the sarcoplasm. Yes. Okay. Wow. That's not real bodybuilding.
When they do this, their metabolism, and I'm using that word loosely, I don't mean their base metabolic rate, I mean their energy turnover, goes up like 1,200 calories.
Oh. Your metabolic rate goes up, your lifespan shortens. It's really simple.
What? And I know people say that's crazy.
That's why people aren't living to their full potential. They eat these toxic plants. Number one, the toxins are deteriorating you. Number two, your metabolic rate is very high. So you're deteriorating faster than you're aging. And you're going to die. You're going to die young, really. Because nobody knows how long a human being could live, because there's no study of like, let's get these babies and put them on a pure raw diet like we used to do in the past, like eat raw meat and blood, organs and seafood and stuff, and see what will come of these children when they grow up. How long will they live? Well, there's no study to show you that, but it's kind of obvious in the past they must have lived very long. But here's the question: how long can they live? I don't know. Humans were fighting against each other, especially when they started eating plants. So when they started eating plants, that shortened their lifespan, that made them aggressive, high estrogen. Men started killing each other, because at one point they said that these cities, these advanced cities, they weren't warmongering. They weren't fighting with each other. So when did humans start to fight with each other? When did they start to fight and kill and do these weird things? Well, probably most likely when they started doing the slave food diet, get it, farming, because high estrogen, aggressiveness, and poison makes you do that.
Can't. Like, yeah, it totally can. And it does it in the lab. So I would say at that point, our opinions on it are irrelevant. If we take something and we do it and measure it in the lab, then the equipment reads it and measures it.
Yeah.
The only opinion you could have is, was the equipment broken? My opinion, I think the equipment might have been broken every time consistently. See what I mean? Because you can't have an opinion and say, well, there's no, or I believe otherwise. Like, well, so your only opinion becomes, to have any opinion other than the energy turnover goes up would have to be all the researchers lied in every study that's done this. Well, that's a serious claim. That's liable. Like, you go saying that publicly, you could be sued, because you technically are. You're slandering them, and that's cause you problems.
Whatever, blah's nuts. You're not slandering anybody.
Because again, and it's also stupid. They have no reason to lie and risk fraud charges and everything else on something like that. Come on, guys, stupidity. Science fraud's a big deal. But, or the equipment was broke every time. Pretty unlikely. So, and when you look at cultures that eat really high carbohydrate, really low fat, they're not fat. So it kind of, it jives. It makes sense, right? We don't have an obesity problem in East Asia. So what happened? Why is the energy turnover go up? One, the thermic effect goes sky high. The body doesn't convert carbohydrate to fat efficiently. It's not what it's trying to do. It's not good. It wants to make carbohydrate, not make new fat.
But it does, because it in science will corroborate. It does. When it exceeds a certain level, it does. It turns into fat. Fat cells, yes. So, blah. See, I don't know anything. He pretends like he knows something. Look, me, I don't know anything. I have to look up these things because I don't know. You understand me? I'm not going to pay for these tests to find out. They've already put the money into it to find out what it does. And your own experiences will tell you that. My experience tells me that if I exceed a certain level, I'm going to start getting some fat. And it's what's it going to come from? The carbohydrates. That's where it's going to come from.
As a general rule.
It's not going to come from the animal products, that's for sure. It's going to come from the carbs.
We get plenty of fat in our
Hell, I had one guy next to me. This guy had a container of milk, and this guy went over. This Latin guy says, "Oh, you get fat drinking milk. You'll get fat." Well, since when will you get fat drinking milk? Oh, he says it's 3%. It's saturated fat. You're going to get fat. Not necessarily. You're not going to get fat from it. I don't know. Maybe if you drink too much of it, you could. If it exceeds a certain level, who the hell knows? I don't know, but I've never gotten fat from animal products. Like I said, maybe if you overconsume like crazy to a degree.
Diets. So what transpires here is thermic effect goes way up. It starts forcing extra glucose into the mitochondria of your muscle cells.
Man, the excess is stored as glycogen in your muscles and your liver. This guy's an idiot. You understand me? And because you're lifting weights, you're expanding the sarcoplasm. It's called sarcoplasmic hypertrophy.
Body turns into a furnace. It just starts burning through energy. You're sweating. The body temperature will go up if you're not careful. You would just excrete heat. You will sweat to cool back down.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And NEAT goes up. Fidgeting goes up. So in these sort of situations, the amount of fidgeting and extra moving that people do burns hundreds of calories, in addition to hundreds and hundreds of extra calories just burned.
The fidgeting, okay.
Off as thermic effect. This is what happens. Now people say, oh, well, so you must be burning through body fat. Well, no, you're not. You're not burning. Your metabolic rate's going through the roof. But because you're only burning all that glucose and then burning it off as excess heat, your body has no need to burn body fat in that scenario anymore. It has no need to burn dietary.
All of it's getting burned. A lot of it is being stored now in the is being stored in the muscle, expanding the sarcoplasm. That's how you get sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. When it exceeds, that energy exceeds. That's how you build it. That's why people say, did you get the pump? And then they go, oh, got to eat more carbs.
Fat. So you store most of the fat that you eat at that point. Very straightforward.
Yeah, whatever, man. He's just making shit up. I'll see you in the next one. Tell us what you think about that. Like, subscribe, support the channel. See you in the next video.